Weather forecast for June the 6th. Overlord area. Wind southwest. Force 4 to 5 occasionally. 6. Visibility good to moderate occasional showers. Sea moderate to rough. Those were the first words entered into the morning log at Allied Naval Command Portsmouth, 0400 hours June 5, 1944. A routine entry, yet it decided the course of the Second World War. For nearly a week, the invasion of France had been on hold. Storms swept across the English Channel, grounding aircraft, scattering small landing craft, and burying any chance of surprise beneath cloud and wind. The tides were wrong, the waves too high. What men called Operation Overlord waited on the sky itself. At Southwick House, the temporary nerve center of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force maps lay pinned across a long wooden table. Around it sat Eisenhower, Ramsey, Montgomery, Lee, Mallory, and a single meteorologist, Group Captain James Stagg of the Royal Air Force. His charts and his voice would decide when to launch. Outside, the weather lashed the English coast. Patrol craft rolled in the swell at Spithead. Men in uniform tried to sleep through the pitching of anchored ships. In the airfields across southern England, more than 10,000 aircraft sat grounded. The invasion force was ready, but the sea refused. Inside that room, debate turned to silence. Each commander looked at the wall of cloud symbols drawn in chalk across the map. If we wait, one said, we lose the moon. If we go, we lose the fleet. No one spoke for several seconds. Then came Stagg's latest report, brought in just before midnight. Conditions improving. Temporarily. His Scottish accent clipped the words evenly without emotion. A small corridor of calm was forming over the channel, perhaps for 24 hours, no more. Eisenhower turned toward him. No flourish, no hesitation. He simply nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "Let's go." It was a decision made not by generals nor machines, but by the narrow breath of weather between storm fronts, the last chance before the tide turned again. Within hours, coded messages went out to every Allied port. Convoys began to move under the breaking sky. The sea was still rough, the wind still hard. But the order stood. History would begin between wind wave and tide. The surviving record of the weather reports that determined the timing of the Normandy invasion originates from a set of typed and handwritten sheets preserved in the archives of the Royal Air Force Meteorological Branch and the United States Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence. The core of these materials, labeled Forecast File Operation Overlord, June 1944, was compiled between 2 and 7 June 1944 by the team of Group Captain James Martin Stagg, Chief Meteorological Officer attached to the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. The primary source material includes routine synoptic charts, teletype bulletins from the Dunstable Forecasting Center, and hand-marked tide calculations referencing the French coast between Cherbourg and Le Havre. Each document was intended for operational use only and marked most secret. The purpose of these reports was strictly functional to provide surface wind cloud cover and sea state predictions for the English Channel and adjacent coastal waters, where 5 Allied beachheads, Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, were scheduled to receive the largest amphibious landing force in recorded history. The context of their creation is inseparable from the urgency of that moment. Every hour of weather observation could alter the course of the invasion. The meteorological officers did not write for history. They wrote for survival and timing. The setting in which these documents were produced was not a formal laboratory, but a series of improvised command rooms scattered across southern England. The central analysis took place at Southwick House near Portsmouth, a 19th-century estate requisitioned by the Royal Navy in 1943. There, in its wood-paneled library, a long table was converted into the principal situation map of Operation Overlord. On that table, every line of wind, every anticipated swell was drawn by hand and pencil, then traced over with colored grease markers. The key individuals responsible for these observations belonged to a combined meteorological unit formed by integrating British, American, and Canadian weather services. Group Captain Stagg, a Scottish officer of the Royal Air Force, coordinated the forecasts based on competing inputs from the British Meteorological Office and the U.S. 9th Air Force Weather Section. Among his British assistants were Flight Lieutenant Robert C. Swain, Squadron Leader M.W.R.D. Mitchell, and civilian scientist Charles D. Day. Their American counterparts included Colonel Donald Yates and Captain Irving Crick. the latter known for his unorthodox pattern recognition methods and controversial advocacy of long-range forecasting. The tension between these differing methodologies, empirical observation versus analog patterning, shaped much of the discussion that unfolded inside Southwick House during the first week of June. The language of the reports was mechanical. Entries were organized by date, time, and sector. A typical notation from June 3rd reads, Channel Sector South, overcast stratuspaces. 400 fruit, tops, 1. 200 fruit, rain intermittent wind, west-northwest, force 5 sea rough. The precision was essential, not literary. Each figure would be read by naval planners calculating whether landing craft could maintain formation across the channel, and by air commanders determining whether low-level bombing runs could proceed at dawn. The archival evidence also includes memoranda prepared by Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, Allied Naval Commander-in-Chief, and General Bernard Montgomery, Commander of the 21st Army Group. These notes, written in ink on lined paper, confirm the dependency of every strategic timetable on weather clearance. Ramsay's entry for 2nd June 1944 reads, If wind remains above force 5, small craft cannot approach beaches without unacceptable loss. Montgomery's subsequent annotation, weather still the only obstacle, underlines the same conclusion. Complementing the Allied records are the German coastal weather reports intercepted by British intelligence through the Y service listening stations at Scarborough and Bletchley Park. These fragments, catalogued as Ultra Decrypts HW5-123, revealed that German meteorologists stationed in Brittany and Normandy were also reporting unfavorable conditions for air operations on 5th June, a factor that reinforced the enemy's expectation that no invasion would be attempted under such weather. In hindsight, it was precisely this forecast error that contributed to the element of surprise. The preservation history of these files is itself a chronicle of post-war archival practice. The Stagg papers were first deposited at the Meteorological Office in Bracknell in 1950, then transferred to the United Kingdom National Archives Kew under the classification AIR 37-1035. Parallel American material, including General Eisenhower's correspondence with his Chief of Staff Walter Bedell Smith concerning the forecast, resides in the Eisenhower Presidential Library, Abilene, Kansas File Group, D-Day Operations, June 1944. The original tide tables used for the invasion beaches, showing the first light of dawn at 05:58 hours and high tide at approximately 06:30, were preserved separately in the Hydrographic Department records of the Admiralty. Each of these sources converges on the same central reality, that the entire invasion, an operation involving over 5,000 ships, 156,000 men, and thousands of aircraft, could proceed only if a precise intersection of time and nature permitted it. The context, therefore, is one of constrained agency. Human command relied upon atmospheric compliance. The temporal frame of the documents spans from 29 May to 7 June 1944. Corresponding with a sustained period of low-pressure movement from the Atlantic. Meteorological readings from Valentia, Reykjavik, and Blacksod Bay in Ireland were transmitted by telegraph and formed the early warning chain that identified a break in the weather. These Irish observations, particularly those from Blacksod Bay lighthouse keeper Ted Sweeney, later proved decisive. They recorded the first evidence of an approaching high-pressure ridge that would stabilize the channel for less than 2 days. The observation pressure, rising steadily, wind moderating, was sent to London late on 4th June and forwarded to Southwick shortly after midnight. The historical integrity of these reports has been cross-verified through post-war oral testimony. In 1956, Stagg published a memoir titled Forecast for Overlord, in which he reprinted several of his original telegrams verbatim. Subsequent verification by the UK Meteorological Office in 1972 confirmed the authenticity of the data based on surviving synoptic archives. Modern historians, including Anthony Beevor and Stephen Ambrose, have cited these same entries to reconstruct the timing of Eisenhower's decision. Beyond the forecasts themselves, the contextual framework includes operational logs from Allied naval convoys. The U.S. Navy's Western Task Force report notes that Convoy U-2 departed from Plymouth at 0100 hours on June 5 under overcast conditions, wind force 5. The British Eastern Task Force, sailing from the Solent, recorded barometric readings of 29.4 inches and rising, a confirmation that the predicted calm was forming. These entries align precisely with Stagg's window. The official record of Eisenhower's decision exists in two parallel forms: the shorthand notes of Lieutenant Commander Harry Butcher Eisenhower's naval aide and the typed daily summary. Supreme Headquarters, dated 4:35 June 1944. Both confirm that after reviewing Stagg's updated forecast, Eisenhower stated simply, "We'll go." The accompanying document, labeled Operational Order Number 1, Neptune, was released at 0600 hours and transmitted via teleprinter to all field commands. The meteorological appendix attached to that order remains one of the few instances in military history where weather, not strategy, occupied the first page. The authenticity of the forecast file is further reinforced by cross-reference with the photographic reconnaissance logs from the Royal Air Force's No. 2 Group. Frames captured at 10,000 feet on the afternoon of June 6th show partial cloud breakup over the Normandy coastline, consistent with the predicted improvement. These photographs, preserved in the Imperial War Museum's Air Historical Branch collection, form the visual corroboration of Stagg's accuracy. Thus, the context of this documentary lies not in battlefield movement or political command, but in the invisible architecture of decision-making, a record of observation, calculation, and probability. The surviving documents provide no dramatization, only coordinates readings and measured speech. They form the written memory of a moment when the fate of Europe rested on the tone of a meteorologist's voice and the fragile promise of a passing high-pressure ridge. Between 29 May and 2 June 1944, the first series of reports that would later determine the fate of the invasion were assembled. They form the earliest layer of the surviving documentation observations made before any decision, before any fleet moved. The tone of these writings remains matter-of-fact, mechanical, and deliberate, as though each entry existed in isolation from the enormity of the event it served. The earliest surviving communication from the meteorological group reads simply, "General trend. Atlantic depression. Moving east, centered 55°-20°, moving slowly. Expect deterioration." The note is unsigned but identified by the initials RCS, attributed to Flight Lieutenant Robert C. Swain, Stagg's assistant. It was written on the evening of 29 May and transmitted to Southwick House by teleprinter from the meteorological office in Dunstable. The words are routine, the handwriting unhurried. Yet this was the first acknowledgement that the carefully chosen invasion window of early June was at risk. On the same day, Admiral Ramsey recorded in his operations diary, "Weather unsettled. Visibility 3 to 5 miles. Winds westerly increasing. Continued unfavorable for amphibious movement." Preparations proceed nevertheless. Ramsey's notations later entered into the Admiralty War Diary under the heading, "Naval Command." Overlord. Preparations reflect no alarm. His function was to maintain readiness regardless of weather, but even his language suggests anticipation of delay. Group Captain Stagg's own diary begins formally on 30th May 1944. The opening page, later declassified and published in 1955, reads, "Dunstable reports persistent low pressure extending from Iceland to Biscay. Latest charts show no sign of ridge development. Concern growing over fixed invasion dates. Repeated discussion with U.S. delegation, still optimistic based on analog sequence. I remain doubtful." That final sentence, "I remain doubtful," stands as the first recorded opinion within the file, neutral in phrasing, but revealing uncertainty. Stagg did not elaborate further. He simply attached barometric readings and wind speeds. Throughout the first days of June, the correspondence between Dunstable, Southwick, and the naval bases became a continuous flow of clipped telegrams. At 0200 hours on 1 June, a message marked "Urgent" was sent to Schaeff Communications Room, forecast for channel 48 to 50 degrees, N0204, W winds, WNW force, 5 rising to 7, seas rough to very rough, cloud 810, ceiling 700 feet. Outlook continuing unsettled. The message bears the signature Stagg. It was one of dozens filed that morning. The meteorological record of that date also contains a rare marginal note. Someone, most likely Squadron Leader Mitchell, wrote in pencil, "Impossible for landing craft below Force 4." The comment was not transmitted. It was an internal observation. The surviving chart beside it shows thick pencil strokes marking the depression over the Atlantic. At 1000 hours on the 1st June, General Eisenhower received his first full weather briefing. Lieutenant Commander Harry Butcher, his naval aide summarized the event in his daily journal. The meteorological officers brought bad news. The channel will not be kind to us. Ike listened quietly, then said, "We cannot command the sea. We will wait until we can." The quote has been cross-checked with Eisenhower's own shorthand notes, which contain only the words, "postpone x yes." The operational logs of the Royal Navy's Western Task Force, meanwhile, continue in the language of readiness. From Plymouth, the destroyer USS Corey recorded engines tested. Embarkation proceeding. Weather heavy swell wind force, 5 to 6 barometer falling. No commentary followed. Each vessel kept the same standardized entries, meteorological data, engine hours, signal checks, repeated without reference to the larger uncertainty of command. By the evening of 1st June, the first Joint Forecast Conference convened at Southwick House. Minutes from that meeting survive in the file labeled Conference Notes Weather Situation. The typed transcript begins. Meeting held 2130 hours, Southwick. Present Air Chief Marshal Lee Mallory, Admiral Ramsey, General Montgomery, General Smith Group, Captain Stagg, Colonel Yates, Captain Crick. Discussion: deterioration likely to continue next 24-48 HRs. No safe period yet identifiable. It concludes with the notation: decision, maintain readiness, defer confirmation of H-hour until 4 June. In a private letter dated that same night, addressed to his wife, Stagg wrote, "I feel as if we are standing on the edge of an abyss of cloud. Each new chart seems darker than the one before. I cannot say what the morning will bring." He did not include further reflection. The letter was mailed after the invasion and later added to the archive. On the 2nd June, conditions worsened. The synoptic reports describe strong westerly gale over channel approaches. The convoy area between Portland and the Isle of Wight registered wave heights exceeding 6 feet. Air observation flights were grounded at Thorney Island. In his logbook, Flight Lieutenant Swain wrote visibility nil, storm fronts merging, pressure falling, operation window closing rapidly. His words are exact without embellishment. At 2100 hours that evening, another meeting convened. The transcript records Stagg's cautious statement, "I must report no improvement for at least 48 hours. Present indications suggest further disturbance approaching from the Atlantic. Recommend postponement." Admiral Ramsey replied, "We can delay 24 hours, not more. There is no sign of debate." The note-taker simply inserted the word silence. Parallel entries in the U.S. 9th Air Force Weather Section show a different tone. Captain Crick's report, dated 2nd June 1944, reads, "Analog study suggests possible break in westerly pattern within 3 days. Confidence moderate." This divergence, empirical skepticism versus analog optimism, became the defining tension in subsequent conferences. Stagg's summary to Eisenhower that night included both forecasts, ending with the understated line, "opinion divided." In the Naval War Diary of the British Admiralty, entry for 2nd June 1944 reads, "No change in situation. C&C Ramsey reports postponement of Overlord until earliest suitable date. Fleet held at readiness." The accompanying operational message to convoy commanders, file number ONS or 3452, simply states, "Continue maintenance of ships in ports. Weather prohibits channel crossing." Meanwhile, soldiers across southern England waited without knowing the cause of the delay. The administrative orders from the 29th U.S. Infantry Division mention only operation temporarily deferred by Directive Schaeff. The word weather does not appear. For the men in camps and barracks, the cause of inaction was invisible. The record resumes on the morning of 3rd June 1944. Barometric pressure at Valentia, Ireland had fallen to 29.1 inches. The Atlantic front extended eastward. The channel remained under heavy cloud. A telegram from Dunstable to Southwick at 0600 hours reads, "Pressure gradient steep. Winds WNW force 6-7. Slight moderation possible. 48 hectares." Stagg annotated the margin with a single underlined phrase, "Doubtful." That afternoon, Admiral Ramsey's operations order was amended again. The entry in his logbook states, "If further delay necessary, possible loss of moonlight for paratroop drops after 7 June. Tidal synchronization will not recur until 19 June. The factual tone masks the consequence, a lost window of nearly 2 weeks. At 2300 hours on 3rd of June, Eisenhower's staff assembled once more. Stagg presented updated charts showing the depression centered northwest of Ireland moving slowly east. His report, reproduced in the Schaeff minutes, reads, indications uncertain. Minor ridge may build from the Azores within 36 HURs, if correct temporary improvement. 5 June to early 6 June. Confidence low. Lee Mallory responded. Low ceiling prevents full air cover. Recommend further delay. Ramsey added fleet cannot risk channel crossing in present sea state. Eisenhower listened, then concluded the meeting with the phrase recorded by Butcher, "We'll wait another day." The diary of Group Captain Stagg for 4th of June begins with measured exhaustion, tension considerable. Conference repeated at short intervals. American colleagues divided. My own view window. Possible early morning 6 June, but too soon to advise. Must decide tonight. These lines, found among the original manuscripts, mark the threshold between observation and decision. They close the first phase of the record, the stage where facts accumulated faster than certainty. As of midnight, 4th June, 1944, the documents remain open-ended. The last entry of the day, a single typed line from Dunstable, reads, Atlantic disturbance weakening. There is no punctuation, no comment, no signature. It is the calm before confirmation, a sentence suspended over the sea. Between the night of 4th of June and the morning of 5th June 1944, the written record divides. The reports from British, American, and German observers, all describing the same sky and sea, differ in tone, timing, and conclusion. Each document is factual within its own logic. Taken together, they reveal not consensus, but divergence, the texture of uncertainty that preceded D-Day. The first contradiction appears within the Allied forecasting team itself. At 21:30 hours on 4th June, Group Captain Stagg convened a final consultation at Southwick House. His summary, preserved in the file, Conference Record Number 5, begins. Forecast indicates improvement during 5 to 6 June due to transient ridge from the Azores. Expected wind moderation to force 3-4. Confidence moderate. Attached to the same record is a parallel memorandum from Captain Irving Crick, representing the U.S. 9th Air Force Weather Section. Analysis of historical analogs for similar pressure systems indicates continued westerly pattern with minor break, 7 to 8 June. Probability of sustained improvement on 6 June, less than 30%. Both documents were read aloud in Eisenhower's presence that night. No conclusion was drawn. The official minutes close with the words CNC Eisenhower requests further confirmation at 0400 hours. At that same hour, a second set of reports reached London from the meteorological office at Dunstable. These, signed by Flight Lieutenant Swain, contain sharper language. Moderate improvement. Probable early 6 June. Ceilings 1,500 feet. Winds west-southwest. Force 4. Rain occasional. Visibility 5 to 8 miles. Swain's figures matched Stagg's optimism. The alignment between the two British reports stands in contrast to Crick's continued skepticism. The record from Schaeff Communications notes that both forecasts were distributed under equal classification, top secret, without prioritization. Across the Channel, the German Meteorological Service was compiling its own estimates. The Luftwaffe Weather Center at Le Mans, under Colonel Heinz Letau, issued a bulletin at 2300 hours on 4 June, Atlantic low, persisting no change before 7 June. Winds westerly, force 5-6. Cloud extensive. Operations impossible for air or sea landings. Intercepted later by British intelligence, this assessment would confirm how the enemy read the same barometric chart as assurance of inactivity. The German High Command concluded that the Allies could not invade under such conditions. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, responsible for coastal defense, left France for Germany on the morning of 5 June, expecting at least 3 days of foul weather. His adjutant's log notes. Trip to Herrlingen authorized. No immediate threat anticipated. Within the Allied camp, the divergence continued through the night. At 0200 hours on 5 June, Stagg's team recorded barometric readings rising at 0.05 inches per hour across the Channel. The new charts showed a faint but consistent pressure ridge. At 0215, Stagg issued his sixth and final forecast. Clearance confirmed. Improvement expected to last 24 HURs. Proceed with operations, 6 June. Simultaneously, Captain Crick filed his counter-estimate data insufficient, recommending postponement to June 7th. Pattern instability high. In the margin of Stagg's report, another hand, likely that of Colonel Yates, wrote British opinion firm U.S. not convinced. Eisenhower's staff logbook for 5th June records the exchange without elaboration. 2 schools. Decision required. The record is exact, absent of commentary. At 03:15 hours, Air Chief Marshal Lee Mallory, commanding Allied Air Forces, expressed his objection. His typed note reads, "Ceilings below 1,000 feet will prevent formation bombing. Drop accuracy for paratroops cannot be maintained. Risk unacceptable." Immediately below, General Montgomery appended a contrasting line in handwriting. "Ground assault cannot wait. Delay will destroy momentum." The disagreement between Air and Ground Command remains one of the clearest examples of internal divergence documented in the archives. Parallel to these British and American exchanges, the Naval Communications Network registered yet another perspective. The Admiralty's Fleet Weather Bulletin No. 215, transmitted from Plymouth at 0400 hours, reported sea conditions as rough swell west-northwest, 6 to 8 feet. The U.S. Navy's task force log for the same hour, filed by Captain John B. Lunsford, described the sea as moderate waves, 3 to 5 feet. The discrepancy likely reflects location differences, but both reports entered the official record under the same timestamp. In the subsequent post-war analysis, historians would note this inconsistency as typical of pre-digital weather observation. Meanwhile, the German Naval Command at Brest reached a different conclusion altogether. Their Kriegsmarine Meteorologischer Bericht No. 17844 states Channel Sea state rough to very rough. Swell continuing. Any attempt at major crossing impractical before 10th of June. It remains one of the few enemy assessments to explicitly assert impossibility. Allied planners would later cite this misjudgment as the invisible ally of Operation Overlord. Contradictions also appear within eyewitness accounts from that same night. In the personal diary of Flight Lieutenant Charles D. Day, assistant forecaster, he wrote, "Stagg appears exhausted. Crick still arguing. Americans unwilling to concede. Ike calm, almost detached. It will be his word at dawn." This entry, unpolished and private, confirms the atmosphere of tension, but refrains from judgment. The log of Admiral Ramsey, preserved in the Admiralty Series ADM 100-99214, offers another factual angle. His entry for 5th June reads, "Sea still heavy but steady rise in pressure." At 0415, message received, "Proceed." Issued Operation Order Neptune to all commands. Sailings commenced 0430 HRs. He did not record further discussion. When the first convoys began to move, many lower-ranking officers remained unaware of the conflicting forecasts. The journal of Lieutenant Jack Broom, serving aboard a British minesweeper, includes the note, "Orders sudden. Weather foul, but we sail. Talk of postponement gone." No one's sure what changed. Broom's observation, though minor, stands as indirect evidence of the information gap between command level and fleet. The last of the British forecasts, transmitted from Dunstable at 0600 hours, concludes with language that seems both confident and cautious. Pressure now 29.7 inches and rising. Cloud breaking west of Cherbourg. Expect improvement to spread eastward. Period of stability, 18 to 24 HRs. The German equivalent sent from Paris to Berlin at 0700 reports the opposite depression stationary. No clearing before 7 June. Sea rough, operations impossible. Both are true within their own measurement zones. The Atlantic remained stormy to the west. The Channel was calming to the east. The difference of a few hundred miles determined the accuracy of one forecast and the failure of another. In Eisenhower's war diary maintained by Butcher, the decisive entry appears at 0415 hours. Weathermen agree to disagree. Ike listened. Stagg firm. Decision made. We'll go. The note ends there. No elaboration, no mention of dissent. Yet within the supporting documents, the dissent remains recorded line by line. Post-war interrogation of German officers added further layers to this contrast. General Alfred Jodl, during questioning at Nuremberg in 1946, recalled, "We were convinced by our meteorologists that an invasion in early June was impossible." The report said storm over the Channel for days to come. No one at OKW expected movement until at least 8th June. His statement aligns with the intercepted German forecasts of 4 to 5 June, confirming that the misinterpretation of the same meteorological data led to strategic complacency. Later cross-checking by Allied historians revealed another subtle divergence within the British system itself. The Dunstable office used readings from Irish coastal stations, particularly Blacksod Bay, while the American section relied more heavily on Atlantic shipping data. Blacksod's measurements showing pressure rise proved decisive. A memorandum dated 1947 from the UK Meteorological Office summarizes Irish stations provided key early evidence of ridge formation missed by Atlantic reports, resulting divergence between US and UK forecasts traceable to differing data sources. Thus, the contradiction was structural, not personal. Each forecaster read truth within his available field. The surviving correspondence between Stagg and Crick exchanged in 1948 during the preparation of Stagg's memoir captures this reconciliation. Crick wrote, "You were right, James. I had only the larger picture. You had the local weather." Stagg replied, "We both had the truth that was before us." The phrase encapsulates the character of these records, a collision of accurate perceptions framed by limitation. Each observer described the same wind and sky, but from different vantage points of geography, method, and command expectation. By dawn on 5 June 1944, the contradictions were no longer theoretical. Convoys were at sea under skies still uncertain, waves still breaking across the channel. The reports, when read together today, offer not the single line of a decision, but the layered echo of its making, a chorus of calculation, doubt, and probability. No document cancels another. Each remains complete in its own right, forming a mosaic of factual disagreement that, when viewed as a whole, defines the truth more precisely than any unified statement could. Between 6 and 8 June 1944, the tone of the surviving documents changes. Observation turns into record. Record turns into evidence. The men who had predicted the weather now measured its consequences. The invasion was underway, and the sea that had threatened to prevent it became part of its story. The first comprehensive entry after the landings is the Naval Meteorological Report No. 6, issued by the Royal Navy's Hydrographic Department at 2000 hours on 6 June. It reads, "Channel conditions: wind, WSW, force 4 to 5, moderate seas, swell 3 to 4 ft, visibility good. Weather generally favorable to operation." The phrasing is spare. The same report includes the notation, "Some LCT's landing craft tank reported difficulty maintaining formation in surf, otherwise satisfactory." No commentary follows. Parallel to this, the U.S. Navy's Task Force Operation Log, Western Beaches, dated 6 June, includes continuous entries between 0430 and 1000 hours. Among them, H hour 0630, weather cloudy, ceiling 1-200 feet. Surf heavy but within limits. Wind 20 knots from 240 degree. First waves landed. Fire support adequate. At 0915, the same log adds 1 LCT capsized off Omaha, probable weather factor. Operations continue. The entry ends with the abbreviation WXOK, the shorthand for weather acceptable. The combined operations report filed 8 June records. Forecast valid. Weather on D-Day within expected range. Subsequent deterioration, 7 to 8 June, did not affect lodgment. The comment appears under the section Post-Operation Meteorological Evaluation. Its conclusion is understated. Forecasts satisfactory. The meteorological team's own after-action summary, written by Group Captain Stagg on 9 June 1944, occupies 4 pages of typed text. The first paragraph reads, "Weather conditions on morning 6 June corresponded closely with predicted temporary improvement. Winds moderated to force 3-4, cloud base 1000 to 1,500 feet. Visibility generally good. Forecast accuracy high within tolerance." He adds on the final line, "Deterioration commenced evening 7th of June, as expected." There is no mention of the invasion's outcome, only verification of the forecast itself. The Allied Expeditionary Forces official communiqué of 6 June contains its own factual phrasing. Under cover of naval and air bombardment, Allied forces landed this morning on the coast of France. Landings proceeding satisfactorily. The meteorological condition of the channel is not stated directly, but internal notes in SHAEF headquarters confirm that weather remained under continuous review. The summary of weather observations. 6 June 1944 lists data from 12 stations noting wind west-southwest force 4, sea state moderate, visibility 6-10 miles, cloud 710, stratocumulus. The report ends, no unexpected changes. On the German side, the Kriegsmarine Command Diary from 6 June offers a sharply different tone. Surprise landing by enemy forces along Normandy coast under conditions previously considered unsuitable for invasion. Meteorological assessment failed to anticipate break in weather. The entry continues sea rough but navigable. Air operations hindered by low cloud. Enemy action continues. Later that evening, another line appears. Immediate reassessment of forecasting reliability ordered. Post-action documents from the German Meteorological Service captured after the war provide more detail. Bulletin Luftlage 6.644 states, clearing began over channel between 200-0400 hours. Pressure rising rapidly. Conditions unexpectedly favorable for Allied air operations. The attached commentary reads, forecast error due to insufficient observation network west of Bay of Biscay. The handwriting below that line, unidentified, adds a single remark. We looked the wrong way. The Royal Air Force Operations Record Book for 6 June confirms the clearing skies noted by the Germans. From number 2 group sorties 1-10. Cloud base improved to 2,000 feet by 0900. Visibility 8 to 10 miles. Losses minimal due to favorable weather. The meteorological officer's appendix to that record concludes, forecast verified to within 5% deviation. For the ground forces, weather became both obstacle and ally. The after-action report. 5 Corps submitted 10 June describes the immediate environment of Omaha Beach wind, west-southwest, 15 to 20 knots. Surf 3 to 5 foot. Landing craft suffered heavy drift. Several tanks flooded. Naval gunfire support affected by smoke and mist. Despite surf troops established foothold. The same documents annex on environmental conditions notes. Tide tables accurate. Rising tide as forecast at 0638 HRs facilitated recovery of craft. A field report from the British 50th Division landing at Gold Beach adds further detail. Sea state moderate. Cloud 810 base 1,000 feet, visibility fair. Weather advantageous for approach but hindered close air support. Every number corresponds to Stagg's predictions of 4th June entered before the operation began. The Allied Meteorological Consolidation Report, prepared in mid-June 1944, collects these observations. Its summary paragraph reads, Operation proceeded during brief intermission in storm cycle. Atmospheric stability lasted 36 HRs. Subsequent deterioration beginning 7 June validated pre-invasion forecast window. Without this break, amphibious operations would have been impossible. It then lists barometric values for 5 to 8 June showing steady rise followed by renewed fall. In a separate memorandum to the Admiralty, dated 11th June, Stagg reported, forecast window closed as of evening 7th June. Winds increased to force 6 by 8 June. Channel again unsuitable for large-scale movement. Conclusion. Operation Overlord achieved under unique meteorological interval. The phrasing unique meteorological interval recurs in multiple documents written after the invasion. The U.S. Navy Post-Operation Summary, filed 12 June, repeats that conclusion in American terminology. Forecast window proved decisive. Had postponement continued, gale on 19 June would have destroyed invasion craft concentrations. That same gale would later wreck parts of the Mulberry Artificial Harbor at Omaha, confirming retrospectively how narrow the margin had been. The meteorological narrative continues in administrative tone throughout the month. The SHAEF daily weather summaries after 6th of June show constant deterioration. Entry for 9 June, winds increasing force, 6 to 7. Seas rough. Continued restrictions on resupply operations. Entry for 10th of June, visibility poor. Rain. Air transport limited. Beach operations delayed. By 11 June, the notes read, Allied forces continue to consolidate lodgment. Weather unfavorable but manageable. Stagg's final wartime communication on the matter, dated 13 June 1944, summarizes the brief improvement of 6 June, cannot be regarded as ordinary fluctuation, but as a transient ridge of pressure rare for the season. The decision to proceed within this window justified by subsequent deterioration. No other commentary appears. The tone remains consistent, observational, not celebratory. In 1945, the British Meteorological Office compiled its Operational Meteorology in the European Theatre Report with a section titled The Normandy Operation. Its abstract states, forecast responsibility, centralized at SHAFE Meteorological Office. Principal forecaster, GCPT, J.M. Stagg. Weather window occurred as predicted, 6 June 1944. Forecast successful within expected limits. Casualties due to sea conditions minimal compared to estimates for Force 5-6. The section concludes, demonstrates critical link between meteorological science and operational success. American sources later published similar conclusions. The U.S. Army Air Force's Weather Division. Historical Study No. 4, written in 1946, includes the line, forecast for 6th June 1944 stands as an example of correct synoptic reasoning under conditions of extreme uncertainty. It includes a table comparing predicted and actual wind speeds differing by less than 2 knots. The report's closing statement reads, forecast credited with enabling the operation to proceed. Even the German retrospective analysis in 1947 acknowledges this. The Deutsche Wetterdienst, Nachkriegsbericht under the heading Fehler der sechsten Juni-Prognose. Records. Forecast. Underestimated eastward advance of high-pressure cell. Absence of observation network over mid-Atlantic contributed to misjudgment. Allied forecast superior inaccuracy. The conclusion is bureaucratic error corrected in future models. The record deepens further in the post-war testimonies of those involved. In a 1953 interview for the BBC series The War in the Air Group, Captain Stagg summarized his experience with the same restraint that marks his written documents. I gave the forecast that permitted the invasion to proceed. The data were incomplete. The decision was the commander's. The forecast happened to be right. No expression of triumph follows, only the implicit weight of accuracy as duty. Thus, the middle record closes on verification. The forecasts, the logs, and the after-action analyses all confirm the same limited truth that the conditions of 6th June matched prediction within tolerances small enough to define success. Every line from the first telegram to the final memorandum treats the weather not as myth or omen, but as measurable circumstance. The documents read together describe a chain of technical observations that became historical cause. The barometer rose. The sea calmed. The landing craft moved. Within 48 hours, the window closed and the channel turned violent again. The record ends where it began, with the language of pressure, wind, and tide, the language that decided a continent. The last dated entry in the forecast file, Operation Overlord, June 1944, is typed in black ribbon ink, single-spaced with no marginal notes. The heading reads simply, SHAFE Meteorological Summary. 00s and hours, 7 June 1944. The content occupies 8 lines. Weather wind WNW force 5 increasing. Sea moderate to rough. Visibility fair becoming poor later. Outlook deterioration. Beneath it a stamped signature, J.M. Stagg, GP, Captain RAF. There are no further entries. There are. The file continues for several blank pages. The next sheet is marked Continuation, but carries only a single penciled word at the top margin closed. The paper is identical to earlier forms. The typewriter ink lighter, as though the ribbon had begun to fade. There are no corrections or annotations. From that point onward, the remaining documents shift away from the present tense. The voice of the forecast ceases. The records that follow are administrative weather returns, verification tables, reports of equipment recovery. The active language of prediction ends with that line, outlook deterioration. The naval logs confirm the change. The Admiralty Operations Record Book under date 7 June 1944 carries this entry. Weather worsening. Winds WNW force 6. Sea rough. Continued unloading of supplies at beaches despite surf. No further meteorological advisories issued from SHAFE. Forecast period concluded. After this, a horizontal line is drawn across the page. Below it, blank space extends to the next date, 8th June, where the handwriting changes. The succeeding officer writes in smaller script without the precision of the previous hand. The effect is mechanical, but final. One man's duty ending another's beginning. The U.S. Navy's Task Force Report for 7th of June, mirrors this transition. The log from the flagship USS Ancon ends the daily meteorological section with weather holding marginal. Sea rough. Operations continue. Forecast section disbanded 1200 hours. The following pages are filled with landing statistics, communications reports, and casualty lists. The atmosphere of calculation is replaced by enumeration. Group Captain Stagg's personal diary stops on the same date. The final entry, written in longhand on the evening of 7th June, reads, "Pressure falling. Sea returning to its earlier mood. Forecast complete." There are no sentences after that line. The next page in the notebook is blank. In the parallel files of the Meteorological Office Dunstable, the last transmission recorded under the Overlord heading is a teleprinter message sent at 1900 hours on the 7th June channel visibility reduced. Winds rising to force 6-7. No further advisories required. The message number sequence ends there. The following day's transmissions are cataloged under a different operation code, Neptune Resupply. The original sequence, those that bore the prefix OVL, ceases entirely. The cessation was procedural, not symbolic. Once the invasion began and weather ceased to dictate timing, the record-keeping reverted to routine. Yet the documentation's silence marks an ending more distinct than any official statement. The tone of the surviving entries reflects closure by absence. A postscript from the SHAFE Administrative Branch dated 10 June explains meteorological detachment released from continuous duty. Remaining tasks to be conducted by routine forecast offices. Overlord forecast section to stand down. The memorandum is unsigned. The only annotation in pencil reads, "All done." The operational files move on to other concerns. The Combined Chiefs of Staff report for June 1944 lists meteorology under support services, noting briefly forecasting arrangements adequate. No further special coordination required. No individual is mentioned by name. The entire function that once determined the largest invasion in history is summarized in a single line. On the German side, the record ends more abruptly. The Kriegsmarine Weather Station report from Cherbourg captured intact breaks off mid-sentence. The final typed line reads, "Visibility 35 km. Wind WNW force 5. Operations of enemy continue despite." The sheet ends there. The next page in sequence is missing. In the surviving copy held at the Bundesarchiv, the last sentence trails off at trots. The carbon copy beneath shows the imprint of the same unfinished word. No continuation has been found. The Luftwaffe Meteorological Service's final Normandy bulletin, Wetterlage 8.644, states only all forecasts suspended due to loss of regional communication. Below the heading, the page is blank. Within the Allied files, the last human trace of the forecasting effort appears in a handwritten note appended to the 9 June meteorological analysis for Western Europe. The handwriting is faint, slanted, and unsigned, window closed exactly as expected. It is written at the bottom margin below the printed table in pencil rather than ink. The context is administrative, yet the line functions as an epitaph for the preceding weeks of vigilance. The next surviving sheet, dated 10 June, opens a new folder, Routine Continental Forecast. The typeface changes, the header altered. The term Operation Overlord no longer appears. The end of the record is not marked by ceremony. It is defined by omission. The last forecast, the final entry, the absent continuation all signal that the extraordinary has reverted to the ordinary. Post-war archivists noted the same quiet conclusion. A catalog description from 1951 reads, "File ends with forecast 00s and hours, 7 June 1944. Subsequent pages missing or blank. No indication of further compilation. The annotation added by a staff historian concludes, evidently final issue." In 1964, when the documents were declassified, archivist R.J. Reynolds inserted a cover note summarizing the collection. It reads, "Contains the meteorological reports which preceded and accompanied the Allied invasion of France, June 1944. Final forecast concludes 7th June with note of deterioration. No subsequent entries. A small ink stamp below the note identifies its storage location, AIR 37, 1035. The mechanical certainty of cataloging completes what the documents themselves had already done, closed the narrative. A single telegram sent from the Admiralty to the Meteorological Office on the 8th June reinforces the closure. "Well done. Forecast exact. No further message is required. No reply survives. Thereafter, the record of weather returns to its civilian form tables, routine bulletins, synoptic charts. The sequence of most secret headers ceases. The language of code names and code numbers, Overlord Neptune disappears. The war continues in other documents, but the file that determined its beginning ends in silence. When Group Captain Stagg retired from service in 1947, he kept a single page from the file. The document, now part of his private papers, bears the last typed line, "Outlook deterioration." On its reverse, he penciled one brief note, "The end of our work." That phrase, though never officially recorded, captures what the documents themselves imply. After the invasion began, the science that had directed it stepped aside. What followed the battles inland, the liberation of France, belongs to other archives. Here, the narrative stops at the edge of weather. The official record closes as the barometer falls again, as if the atmosphere resumed its indifference. Between 29th May and 7th June 1944, the sky had served history for a moment. The paper that recorded it ends without farewell. No summary was written, no conclusion printed. The last line stands alone. Outlook deterioration. It remains the single sentence upon which an empire's gamble closed, factual, final, without punctuation, beyond the period that ends the war's most consequential forecast. After that, the pages are blank. The papers that shaped the decision to launch the Normandy invasion have never been lost, only dispersed. Their survival depends on administrative habit, not deliberate preservation. When the war ended in 1945, the meteorological records of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force were filed among thousands of other routine documents in the custody of the British Air Ministry. No special notation marked their significance. They were simply labeled forecasts. Overlord. In 1950, as the British government began formal declassification of wartime archives, the files were transferred to the newly established Meteorological Office headquarters at Bracknell. Their clerks indexed them by date and origin, assigning serial number AIR 37-1035. For the next 2 decades, they remained closed to public access. The contents, typed forecasts, hand-drawn weather charts, and communications logs, were regarded as technical rather than historical. Their rediscovery occurred indirectly. In 1953, Group Captain James Martin Stagg published Forecast for Overlord, a personal account of his wartime work. The book included excerpts from the original documents, lightly edited for clarity. It was the first time the text "Outlook deterioration" appeared in print. Public interest in the accuracy of the forecast led researchers to trace the original materials. Through correspondence between the Meteorological Office and the Public Record Office at Kew, the complete file was identified and scheduled for release under the 30-year rule. It became open to scholars in 1974. Today, the original carbon copies of the forecasts remain in the United Kingdom National Archives series AIR 37. Each sheet is stored under low humidity conditions in acid-free folders. The typewritten ink, though faded to pale purple, remains legible. A preservation note affixed to the inside cover warns against exposure to light. Copy fragile, consultation by appointment only. Adjacent files in the same series contain related material. Synoptic charts from Dunstable tide calculations from the Admiralty Hydrographic Department, and teleprinter records from Schaeff Communications. Collectively, they form one of the most complete surviving meteorological datasets of the Second World War. Across the Atlantic, the American portion of the same narrative rests in the Eisenhower Presidential Library, Abilene, Kansas. File Group Operational Records. D-Day includes the typed summaries used by Eisenhower and his staff during the final conferences. The pages bear pencil markings presumably made during the briefings, small crosses, underlines, and question marks. The folder's internal title sheet identifies them only as Weather Reports, June 1944. No author is listed. The German records, less complete, were reconstructed after the war from captured material and surviving copies in civilian archives. The fragments of the Luftwaffe Meteorological Service are held today in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg. The final incomplete page from Cherbourg, the one ending with "despite," remains there, filed under RL 7273. Its paper shows water damage. A curator's note states, "Recovered from regional office condition, poor edges missing." Secondary documentation survives elsewhere. The Irish coastal reports from Blacksod Bay, whose rising barometer readings provided the decisive clue, remain in the custody of Met Éireann, the Irish Meteorological Service. In 2004, the keeper's original logbook was exhibited publicly for the first time. The entry for 4th June 1944 reads, "Pressure rising steadily, wind moderating." The ink has browned, but the handwriting is clear. Fragments of the broader forecasting system, communications schedules, signal routing tables, cipher sheets were microfilmed by the Royal Air Force Historical Branch in the 1960s. Those films, now digitized, extend the continuity of the record even where the originals have decayed. Yet despite extensive preservation, several gaps remain. Among them are the missing pages of the Dunstable teleprinter logs between 0000 and 0300 hours on 7 June. Their absence leaves a narrow silence in the hour that marked the end of the Overlord forecast series. Whether the sheets were misplaced, destroyed after use, or never typed at all is not known. A few peripheral testimonies supplement the official record. In 1972, a BBC radio program titled "The Day Before D-Day" interviewed surviving meteorological staff. Flight Lieutenant Robert C. Swain recalled the moment the forecasts ceased. "After we sent the final message, it was quiet. We simply went home." His tone transcribed from the recording mirrors the understatement that defines the original files. The document's current custodians treat them less as relics than as data. The National Archives description lists the collection under Operational Planning Meteorological Reports. It carries no interpretive summary. Scholars studying the material cite it primarily for methodological value, an example of wartime applied science rather than narrative history. Still, the restraint of the language has drawn repeated comment. Historians note how the absence of interpretation within the records has preserved their credibility. They remain technical, unadorned, and free of retrospective judgment. In academic terms, the forecast series represents a transitional moment in military documentation when the act of measurement became inseparable from command. The weather no longer served as background, it was an operational variable. The neutrality of the documents themselves reflects this shift. Every observation, every value, every notation is written as if devoid of human consequence. Yet each determined human movement on the coast of France. The archival chain that protects these papers today mirrors the precision with which they were first produced. They are handled with gloves. Their ink is measured in ultraviolet light to monitor fading. Reproductions are restricted. Researchers view them under timed illumination. The institutional care emphasizes endurance over interpretation. Still, certain questions persist. Among historians of meteorology, debate continues over how far the forecasts were products of science versus intuition. The Irish readings that identified the pressure rise were taken by hand, not by instrument. Stagg's decision to emphasize them over American analog models remains a matter of interpretation. The documents record the data, but not the reasoning. The decision itself, the moment when Eisenhower said, "Let's go," exists outside the paper trail, captured only in witness accounts. Archival cross-referencing has not resolved another detail: the authorship of the penciled note. Window closed exactly as expected. The handwriting does not match any known member of Stagg's staff. It may have been added later by an archivist or typist. The uncertainty illustrates how even the most precise records retain ambiguity. Each file, like each forecast, is partial. Today, replicas of these documents appear in museums in Portsmouth, London, and Calne. Behind glass, the small pages appear almost insignificant. A few lines of typed weather data surrounded by the vast imagery of invasion. Visitors often overlook them. Yet within their numerical calm lies the invisible. The survival of these papers reminds historians that some of the most consequential human decisions are recorded not in proclamations, but in measurements: temperature, wind, visibility, tide. The Normandy forecast remains the clearest instance of that convergence between scientific observation and military command. In the decades since, new generations of forecasters have revisited the Overlord data to compare with modern models. Each study confirms the same outcome: the brief meteorological window was genuine, measurable, and rare. The conclusion, repeated in scientific journals, matches the language of the original record. Forecast correct within operational tolerance. Nothing more definitive can be said. The documents end where observation ends. Their endurance depends on paper ink and institutional order, the quiet infrastructure of memory. In the climate-controlled reading rooms where these pages rest today, the silence that once followed the final forecast persists. Visitors turn each sheet carefully, reading the clipped sentences as they were written. The sound of the paper moving is often the only sound in the room. They remain factual, uncorrected, and final. What began as data became consequence. What survived as paper became history. Each forecast remains a fragment of that night's decision, a record of atmosphere and chance preserved beyond its own necessity. What cannot be known is how close the decision came to being reversed, or how the unseen pressure of time shaped the judgment that followed. The evidence ends before that point. The silence belongs to the human interval between observation and command. In that silence, the past continues to speak without embellishment, without conclusion, through the measured voice of its own record. What if the wind had turned 1 hour sooner? Next, we will follow how another set of forgotten charts drawn for a different coast and a different war would once again determine the course of history.